It was a cold morning in the city, the kind of day when the chill nips at your bones and you can't help but pull your coat tighter around you. People hurried past, heads down, eyes fixed on the pavement, trying to avoid the biting wind. Among the crowd, there was one woman who seemed out of place. She sat on the corner, her legs drawn up to her chest for warmth, wrapped in a thick, tattered blanket. Her face was hidden beneath layers of grime, but her eyes, those eyes, were full of life. She didn't ask for anything. She simply existed there, unnoticed, like so many others who lived on the streets. A man, well-dressed in a sharp suit, passed by her without a second thought. He saw her sitting there, her clothes dirty, her face a mess, and he couldn't help but scoff. "Get a job," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head as he looked away. The woman didn't react, didn't even look up. She had heard this before, hundreds of times. But today, something felt different. Something in the air, in the way the man had walked past her, in the way his words hung in the cold air, made her wonder if anyone would ever see her for who she really was. The man continued on his way, his footsteps echoing in the busy street, his mind already lost in the day ahead. He was a man with purpose, someone who had everything: success, power, respect. Or at least, that's how he saw it. He didn't give much thought to the woman on the corner anymore, even though something about her lingered in the back of his mind. Maybe it was the way she didn't beg, didn't look at him with desperation like others did. She simply sat there, in her tattered blanket, her eyes unfocused, but still somehow full of something he couldn't quite place. He shook the thought off as he entered a nearby cafe, ready to order his usual cup of coffee. But the feeling stayed with him. He glanced at his phone, scrolling through emails, unaware that across the street, the woman was watching him with quiet attention. Her eyes followed his every move, not out of curiosity, but out of something much deeper, a knowing. She'd seen men like him before, and she knew how the world saw people like her. But she also knew that things weren't always as they seemed. What no one knew was that this woman, sitting in the cold with her life seemingly broken, held a secret. A secret that could shatter everything the man thought he knew about the world. Later that afternoon, the man walked out of the cafe, his mind now on business deals, deadlines, and all the things he had to accomplish. As he crossed the street, he glanced at the woman again. She was still there, just as she had been for hours, her eyes distant. He didn't know why he was looking, but for a brief moment he felt a flicker of something, maybe guilt, or maybe it was just the cold that made him uncomfortable. But whatever it was, he ignored it. As he walked past her again, his shoe accidentally brushed against the corner of her blanket. He barely acknowledged it, but she stiffened. He noticed her eyes then, really noticed them for the first time. They weren't the eyes of someone broken or lost. They were sharp, calculating. And in that moment he felt a strange, unsettling feeling in his gut. He brushed it off. It was ridiculous. But something about the way she sat there, so still, made his pulse quicken, though he couldn't explain why. Then, as he was about to turn the corner, he heard her voice. "You really don't know who I am, do you?" she asked, her tone quiet but firm. The man froze in his tracks, turning slowly to face her, confusion and a hint of unease creeping up his spine. "What?" he asked, not quite sure if he had heard her correctly. The woman's eyes locked onto his with a deep intensity. "You have no idea, do you?" she repeated, her voice unwavering. He was about to dismiss her words when he caught something in the way she looked at him. Something that sent a chill through his body. He suddenly felt small. Vulnerable. As if she knew something about him that he didn't. The world seemed to pause around him, and for the first time, he wasn't sure who was in control anymore. The man took a step back, trying to regain his composure. There was no reason to feel unsettled. He was the one with the power, with the life everyone envied. Why should he be affected by a homeless woman's strange words? But something in her gaze made it hard to shake the feeling that there was more to her than met the eye. Who are you?" he asked, his voice faltering slightly, though he quickly tried to mask it with arrogance. The woman didn't respond immediately. She simply stared at him for a long moment, her eyes softening for the briefest of seconds before hardening once again. Then she smiled. It wasn't a warm, friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that sent a shiver down your spine, the kind that told you she knew something you didn't, I'm someone you used to know, she said, her voice low but steady. Before everything changed. He laughed nervously, brushing it off as some kind of weird joke, but there was a knot forming in his stomach. He could feel his pulse quicken as he glanced around, suddenly feeling exposed in the bustling street. His gaze flickered back to her. Right. Okay. I think you've had enough of the cold. He started to walk away, but something stopped him. Something deep inside told him to listen, to not turn his back. Wait. She called out softly, and for a split second, her tone was almost gentle. Do you ever wonder how life would have turned out if you hadn't made that choice? He froze, the hairs on his neck standing up. What choice was she talking about? He had made so many decisions that led him here, to this moment. But none of them seemed to matter now, not with her looking at him with that knowing expression. The wind whipped through the street, but the cold suddenly felt different, like a warning. He turned around slowly, facing her again, his mind racing. What are you talking about? He demanded, his voice now more sharp than before, masking the anxiety creeping in. The woman looked at him, her eyes reflecting something more than just the streetlights. There was a moment of silence, as if she was considering whether to reveal the truth. Remember the charity event you attended last year? She asked, her voice calm, steady. Remember the woman you humiliated in front of everyone? The man's heart skipped a beat. The memory of that night came rushing back, an elegant event full of influential people. He had been the center of attention, as usual, until a woman had approached him with a question about donating to her cause. He had laughed at her, mocked her for her naivete, for thinking she could change anything. He had seen her as nothing, a small, insignificant woman in the grand scheme of things. He'd brushed her off like she was nothing more than an annoyance. But now, as he stood there, facing this woman on the street, it all started to click. He felt his stomach drop. The woman's eyes narrowed, as if she knew exactly what he was thinking. That woman, she began, was me. The world seemed to tilt around him as the woman's words hit him like a punch to the gut. His mind raced, trying to process what she had just said. It couldn't be, it was impossible. He had seen that woman, the one from the charity event, dressed in a designer gown, her makeup flawless and her posture confident. This woman, sitting on the street, wrapped in a dirty blanket, couldn't possibly be her. He laughed, but it was hollow, desperate. That's crazy. You're telling me you're the same woman? He couldn't stop himself from shaking his head, trying to convince himself it wasn't true. The woman nodded slowly, her expression unchanged. Yes, I am, and I've changed a lot since that night. She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. I wasn't always like this, but you played a part in my downfall. Your cruelty, it shattered my world. He took a step back, his breath catching in his throat. I don't remember you. I don't even... No, she interrupted, her voice suddenly firm. You don't remember because you didn't care. You didn't care about how your words could destroy someone. You didn't care about the people you stepped on, the lives you ruined, as long as it kept you at the top. But I remember you, and I remember everything you did. Her eyes seemed to pierce through him now, and he felt something heavy settle in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt something other than control. It was guilt and fear. He had never known how to feel those things, had always pushed them away. But now they seemed impossible to ignore. What happened? He asked, his voice small, almost a whisper, as though he was afraid to hear the answer. How did you end up here? The woman's gaze softened, but only for a moment. I was just trying to help. I had a cause, a dream. But after you humiliated me in front of everyone that night, it broke me. I lost my job, my reputation, and eventually I lost my home. She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. But I didn't lose my strength. He was silent for a moment, unable to look away from her eyes. Something in them, something fierce and unapologetic, made him feel ashamed. He had never truly understood the impact of his actions on others. But now, in the presence of this woman, this person who had endured so much, he felt exposed, raw. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he stood there, paralyzed by the enormity of what she was saying. The woman stood up slowly, wrapping her blanket tighter around her. You don't have to apologize, she said quietly. I don't need your pity. She turned to leave, but just before she did, she glanced back at him. "Remember this moment, because you never know when the tables will turn." And with that, she walked away, disappearing into the crowd. The man stood there for a long time, frozen in place, his mind spinning, the weight of her words sinking in deeper with each passing second. The world around him continued as it always had, but he no longer felt like he was in control. For the first time, he realized that things weren't as simple as they had seemed. And perhaps, just perhaps, he had underestimated the strength of the people he had looked down on for so long. The days following the encounter felt like a fog. The man's life, which had once been so neatly ordered, began to unravel in ways he couldn't understand. He tried to focus on work, on meetings, on his usual routines, but no matter how hard he tried, the memory of the woman lingered. Her words echoed in his mind, replaying over and over again, each time more haunting than the last. "Remember this moment, because you never know when the tables will turn." He couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something he wasn't prepared for. It gnawed at him, slowly creeping into his every thought, unsettling him in a way he hadn't experienced before. It was as though, with one encounter, she had managed to plant a seed of doubt in his soul, one that was now growing, slowly but surely, threatening to consume him. Then one morning, his worst fear became a reality. He walked into his office building, as he always did, confident and expecting nothing out of the ordinary. But as he passed through the lobby, he noticed something strange. There were people gathered around the front desk, whispering among themselves, glancing over at him as he passed by. He barely noticed it at first, but when he reached the elevator, a woman from the lobby caught his eye. She was standing near the elevator doors, talking to a man he recognized, a key investor who had been crucial to his company's success. The investor was usually all smiles around him, but today he looked unsettled. The woman was speaking calmly, but her presence was commanding. He couldn't hear their conversation, but something about the way they were talking made him uneasy. Just as the elevator doors opened, the woman turned and locked eyes with him. It was her, the woman from the street. For a moment he froze, unsure if he was seeing things. But there was no mistaking it. Her eyes were just as piercing as before, her expression just as calm. She smiled at him, and it wasn't the same smile from their last meeting. It was different. It was knowing. It was calculated. He stepped into the elevator, his heart hammering in his chest. But before the doors closed, he heard her voice, clear and steady. "Your company has some interesting new plans, doesn't it?" she said, her words hanging in the air, heavy with implication. "I'm sure your investors will be very pleased with the changes we've made." The doors closed with a soft chime, but he stood there, unable to move, the words repeating in his mind. "We've made." She wasn't just talking about him. She was talking about the company. She was involved now, somehow. It hit him like a tidal wave. The woman wasn't just some random person he had insulted. She had power, real power, and it was clear she had been playing a long game. The elevator ride to his office felt like an eternity. When the doors opened, he stepped out into the hallway, his legs shaky, his mind racing. He tried to convince himself he was overreacting, but deep down, he knew. His life, the very foundation of his success, was about to be shaken to its core. As the days went on, the unease in his chest grew stronger. He couldn't escape the feeling that the woman was slowly taking control, inching closer to the very thing he had worked his entire life to build. His usual confidence had turned into paranoia, and every decision he made felt like it was being watched. He couldn't focus on his work, couldn't ignore the constant, nagging thought that there was something he was missing, something that would change everything. One afternoon, he received an unexpected call. It was from his chief financial officer, a woman he'd trusted implicitly. She sounded frantic. "We've got a problem," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "There's been a sudden shift in the stock market, and we're at risk of losing everything if we don't act fast." And, before she could finish, he interrupted, his heart sinking. "What do you mean, we? What's going on?" "I don't have all the details yet, but there's someone with significant resources who's manipulating our shares. They're selling off massive amounts, and it's driving the price down. If we don't stop them soon, we'll be in deep trouble." He felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead. He knew exactly who was behind this. It had to be her. The woman from the street. Somehow she had found a way into the inner workings of his company, using every bit of influence to sabotage him. Panic started to set in. Find out who's behind this and stop them. We can't let this happen. The CFO promised to get back to him, but he knew deep down that it wasn't just about the money. It was something much more personal now. She was making him pay for what he had done to her, for how he had treated her. Later that evening, the woman appeared again, this time in his office building. The man had been pacing in his office, trying to formulate a plan to salvage what was left of his empire, when the door to his office opened without warning. He didn't even look up at first. "I don't suppose you're here to apologize," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, the weight of everything he was facing pressing down on him. She stepped inside, her presence filling the room like a storm. She didn't respond to his comment. Instead, she walked slowly toward his desk, her eyes fixed on him with quiet intensity. "You really think you can stop me?" she asked, her tone calm but deadly. "You're so used to being in control, so used to making others bend to your will. But you forgot one thing." She paused, her lips curling into a smile. "I've been where you are, I've seen your world, and now it's time for you to see mine." He swallowed hard, a cold fear creeping up his spine. He could feel the walls closing in, and there was no way out. The power, the respect, the success, it all seemed so fragile now. It was all slipping through his fingers, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "You won't get away with this," he said, his voice shaky but defiant. She leaned forward, her face inches from his. "I already have." And in that moment, he understood. She wasn't just getting revenge for what had happened at the charity event. This was something much bigger. She was taking back everything he had taken from her, and he wasn't going to be able to stop her. Not now. Not ever. The man stood there, frozen, as the woman's words sank in. His empire, his carefully built world was unraveling before him, and it was all because of the one thing he had taken for granted: his own belief in invincibility. He had assumed he could always control the narrative, always walk away unscathed. But now in front of him was a woman who had been stripped of everything and had somehow risen again, stronger, sharper, and with a vengeance he could never have anticipated. "You can't just destroy everything I've worked for," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He was desperate now, pleading, but there was no compassion in her eyes. There was only the cold satisfaction of someone who had been wronged and had finally found a way to make it right. "I don't need to destroy anything," she replied, her voice soft but full of power. "You've already done that for me." She turned and started to walk toward the door, but before she left, she paused, looking back at him. "But don't worry," she said with a sly smile. "You'll still have everything you need. A job, a fancy office, your luxury car, but it won't matter. You'll always know who you really are now. And you'll never forget the woman you mocked, the woman who destroyed your world." With those final words, she left, leaving the man standing in the middle of his office, staring at the door as if he could somehow will her to come back and undo the damage. But deep down, he knew she was right. It wasn't the money, the power, or the status that mattered anymore. It was the truth of what he had done, the way he had destroyed a person's life with a single cruel moment. In the days that followed, his worst fears came true. The stock market continued to plummet, and investors pulled out one by one. His company was on the brink of collapse, and he was powerless to stop it. It seemed as though everything he had built had been taken from him, piece by piece. And though he still had his position, his wealth, and his office, something inside him had irrevocably changed. He couldn't shake the image of the woman, her face, her eyes, the calm way she had taken back what was hers. The guilt and shame gnawed at him every moment, a constant reminder of how fragile his world had always been. As for the woman, she never appeared again. But her impact, her presence, lingered. He would never forget the day he had underestimated her. The day his arrogance had led him to mock someone who had the strength to rise from the ashes, someone who had become more powerful than he could ever imagine. And in the silence of his office, he understood what she had meant when she said, "You'll always know who you really are." It wasn't about wealth, power, or success. It was about the choices he made and the people he had hurt along the way. And now, no matter what he did, that truth would follow him for the rest of his life. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more gripping tales with unexpected twists and deep emotions, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and feel free to comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think. And if you think someone else would enjoy this story, share it with them. Your support means the world, and it helps us create more amazing content just for you.